So today has been an interesting day, to say the least. Probably one of the most frustrating days I've ever had in Smite. There are a lot of issues going on with the current patch. I will not go into too much detail here. Just saying that I spent a lot of the day trying to even get any half-decent footage for this video. And the plan that I originally had has shifted a little bit. Originally I was thinking about talking about Bellona specifically and how the new Berserkers Shield item can be used on her. Throughout the process of using that item, playing Bellona more, I realized a few things about it. First of all, one of the things I kinda hadn't really realized was that the healing value has been changed between the variant of Gladiator's Shield, which had extra heal, and the version now on Berserker's Shield, with the heal being increased, and that changes a lot of things. I also realized that the stats really aren't that defensive after all, and it's much more of an aggressive choice that is not necessarily only for solo laners. And the more I thought about it, the more I looked into it, the more I came to the realization that Berserker's Shield as a whole should be the topic of this video. And we'll go over quite a few things surrounding that. We'll talk about the actual healing value and how strong the item is. We'll talk about some potential strategies that you can use it with and how it pairs with other items. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Berserker's Shield costs 1,700 gold and is basically somewhat of the basic attack version of Gladiator's Shield. However, the stats that it has overall are very differently distributed, which makes for quite a different item overall. And this is best understood through a side-by-side comparison. Both items, 1,700 gold, both items start with round shield. Berserker's Shield has 25 physical power. It is not a ability-focused item, but it still has more power than Gladiator's Shield, which only has 20 physical power. Berserker's Shield only has 15 physical protection, whereas Gladiator's Shield has 30 physical protection. So Gladiator's Shield is a much more tanky and less aggressive choice in its stats in that regard. Berserker's Shield also comes with 15% attack speed, whereas Gladiator's Shield has 10% cooldown reduction. I would say in terms of value, 10% cooldown reduction is probably a little bit better for ability-based characters, but 15% attack speed should not be undervalued for basic attack characters, and also obviously has synergy with the passive as well. The passive in Berserker's Shield case is, anytime you hit an enemy with a basic attack, you are healed for 1% of your maximum health and mana. Basic attacks that hit multiple enemies will restore 0.5% of your maximum health and mana after the first hit. So an AoE cleave would hit 2 targets and it would have 1.5% healing and mana restoration, and an AoE hit that would hit 3 targets, which is typically what you have in a wave with Bellona, for example, would heal you for 2% of your health and restore 2% of your maximum mana. Gladiator's Shield, on the other hand, gives you 2.5% of your maximum health and mana if you hit an enemy guard with an ability. That means the sustain from Berserker's Shield is an insane amount higher. Not only does it heal for almost the same if you hit it on a AoE basic attack against 3 targets, but it also would theoretically heal the same if you hit 4 targets. And what's much more important is it works against minions in the first place. So Berserker's Shield is a massive sustain item in lane that, in my opinion, trumps every other sustain item that you can currently get for the early game at least, where Gladiator's Shield gives you the occasional heal if you box a lot. Warrior's Blessing, for example, absolutely pales in comparison to Berserker's Shield when it comes to sustain. Warrior's Blessing will give you 30 health and 30 mana upon damaging an enemy guard once again, and that is every 10 seconds. So if you get Berserker's Shield early on, you will greatly outsustain anyone that's opting to only get Warrior's Blessing for their sustain. Now obviously Warrior's Blessing is a little bit of a different item in that it has damage reduction especially, a little bit of health as well, and gets some protections later on. But overall, the purpose of both items is to be able to aggress on your enemy in lane while also sustaining very well, and Berserker's Shield just does that better in any regard. Berserker's Shield generally follows the concept of another item that was in the game once, and it has the same interactions with AoE as well as with Erlang Shen, who gets a double proc through his dog. That item is Death Toll. Death Toll was 800 gold, had 10 physical power, 100 health, and restored 8 health and 4 mana per basic attack. And then for additional targets after the first one on AoE, it was 4 health and 2 mana per target. This was also on all enemies, not just on gods, so you can definitely see the similarities here. There are some key differences. Death Toll was obviously a starter item, which is why it was a lot cheaper. And Death Toll came with significantly less stats overall. And the stats were also less synergistic. Death Toll, 10 physical power, had a little bit of extra aggression, comparable to the 25 power in Berserkers Shield, where you pay a significant amount more. But Death Toll on top of that had 100 health, but scaled flat. So you would still heal up, but it didn't really matter that you had more health. Whereas Berserkers Shield, if that had the same health, would scale with it and would therefore heal more through it. Instead, Berserkers Shield, however, gets extra physical protection, which means that the healing returns more health in effective health against a physical target, and it also has attack speed, meaning through this item itself, you will get more procs of the item itself. And that's the big synergy part here that Death Toll was definitely missing. And I think this extra cost, plus the fact that Berserker's Shield can scale up into late game to quite ridiculous amounts, is definitely worth the extra gold that you're paying, the extra 900 gold here. And even your mana restore scales up. Obviously you have a smaller mana pool as a warrior, so it's still kind of lower, but again, if you get more mana, it will also help out there. And this 1% scaling is, I think, the most crazy part here. You start the game with around 500-ish, 600-ish HP, you quickly get to 700, and then 800 isn't far, it's around level 5, 6, whatever-ish. If you start with Warrior's Blessing and you have the right god for it, then even earlier. So you will get more sustain out of Berserker's Shield very, very early into the game. And even before that, the sustain is just insignificantly lower and can be compensated for very easily. Yet at the same time, Berserker's Shield in its current form remains rewarding all the way into late game, especially if you focus on building some more health to make it more worthwhile. That, in my opinion, also makes the item a little more synergistic with otherwise not so favored items, like for example, going for Talisman of Energy. Item that is definitely not bad for attack speed focused warriors, with that movement speed and attack speed through the passive, though a bit conditional, and at the same time has 300 health, which effectively means 3 more heal per basic attack per single target from your Berserker's Shield, or even more if you hit multiple targets. And that ramps up very, very quickly. But even without having extra HP, Berserker's Shield feels incredibly strong. For example, we used to have a time where junglers would run double starters when that was still possible, and would run Bumba's Mask along with Death Toll. And that's something that I can absolutely see with Berserker's Shield again with, for example, Bakasura, a basic attack focused assassin. You could start with your normal Assassin's Blessing and get your boots, and the first item that you finish is Berserker's Shield. It still has overall strong enough stats to give you extra damage, also gives you a little bit of tankiness on the side, and also gives you that extra sustain, which makes it so easy to basically clear jungle forever and trade on wherever you want to go. In its current state, Berserker's Shield could, in my opinion, even replace your starter item, your Assassin's Blessing. The problem is that you can't really do that in the current jungle meta, where you have to clear at the start very, very quickly, and you can't just go back to base in between. But that brings me to a rather funny or interesting idea that I had that I wanted to throw out there. I'm not saying this would work on high levels of play or in the pro games or whatever, because it can be countered very easily if you're aware of what the enemy is doing and you have comms between the enemy team basically, and they are looking out for something like that. But if the enemy team is not aware, which in most scenarios will be the case, this is something that can be done. The problem is it requires you to have multiple people in your team in on it. And this is you being the solo laner, getting Berserker's Shield as your first item instead of even going into Warrior's Blessing. This obviously only makes sense when the enemy solo laner is also physical, because otherwise you will not make use of the physical defense. But what you can do, as long as your jungler is okay with it and you have this figured out together, is you can start the game with a round shield, no pots, nothing else, just a round shield, and you, as a solo laner, start at the speed buff on your own. This is important because if you split this camp with anyone, then you will not have enough XP, enough gold for it to work. And this will set your middle lane back a little bit because they don't get the split XP that way. What you want to do is you want to start at the speed. You want to solo it, which pretty much any AA solo laner can. They won't have that much health afterwards, but that's fine here, because what you want to do is you don't want to pick it up. You just want to go straight back to base. At that point, you should have just enough gold to buy Berserker's Shield, and then you teleport into the lane. Now, obviously, this would normally lead to your blue buff getting stolen, and that would be very annoying. And you may also miss a little bit on XP on the first wave. The XP on the first wave shouldn't be an issue because you've solo cleared the speed camp, so you get your XP that way. But the blue buff would be an issue if it wasn't for your jungler. Your jungler is not starting in speed, but is starting at the blue buff instead. That means you will come to lane, you will pick up your blue buff. Your jungler has to walk a little bit to pick up the speed and then do the harpies, but he will still be very, very quick overall and will still probably be in middle lane before the enemy jungler. So overall, it still works out in your favor a little bit in that regard when it comes to clearing. And you will then have Berserker's Shield on level 1 and probably outsustain your enemy and probably don't even depend on any pots at all because Berserker's Shield sustain is crazy good even at the start of the game. Obviously a risky strat, obviously something that can be countered if the enemy is aware of that, but at the same time something that can be pretty fun if it works out and can definitely give you a lane advantage for a while, even though it may bother your mid laner a little bit. But only do it if your jungler is down for it. And with that, to conclude the verdict on Berserker's Shield itself, I think the item is extremely strong right now. I'm expecting it to see some nerfs. I'm expecting those to take a while, you know, new Bellona skin and all. We know the drill at this point, but until then we will see a lot more Erlang Shen, a lot more Cyrus, a lot more Bellona, and probably a lot more basic attack junglers as well very soon, once people figure out how strong it is on them. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. I would much appreciate it. Also, if you want some more insight on how to play Bellona, Teets very recently made a Bellona guide that I will link here, so you can check that out if you want to. It's already updated for Berserker's Shield. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching. Hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth, out.